do a mic check? Mic check. Can everyone hear me in the back? Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate the introduction. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation to be here and speak with you all. I'm really excited to share with you a little more about the work that we're doing in Canner. And even though this talk, we're going to be addressing some serious, some profound issues in our communities related to suicide, this talk, I hope, you're going to come away with a feeling of hope, of a sense of all of the strengths, all of the resources, all of the potentialities of our Indigenous peoples in Alaska and young people. And before I forget and I launch into it, because I'm really excited to get into it, I did want to clarify my introduction that Dr. James Morton, who's also here, is a recipient of the Department of Defense funding that we're really proud to have come to Canner so that we can do a really, it's a really revolutionary, like this is the first time, hi Nettie, that I think we've ever seen a practice I'm telling you about, a suicide prevention approach that is working in Alaska Native communities to build those strengths, to build upon social connection, the Indigenous identification and resilience. We're seeing with this new funding a translation of this practice I'm going to be sharing with you about potentially into a military setting to address our very urgent issues and public health crises in our installations in Alaska. It's very exciting. I'm not going to be able to talk about it tonight, but I encourage you to outreach to Dr. Morton, who's here, to learn more about all of that fine work. But tonight, I'm going to be sharing about our Tools for Life, our Knuzavik work. It's part of our Center for Alaska Native Health Research, which, again, I kind of had geared this talk a little more towards more of a general public. So many of you are familiar with our Center for Alaska Native Health Research, but perhaps there are folks here tonight with us who weren't aware that it even existed, but it does. It lives within our Institute of Arctic Biology. So we're up in the West Ridge campus. Canner was founded in 2001 with a center grant from the National Institutes of Health. And from its very founding, and it was founded by our founding director, and he was my PhD advisor. I came to UAF in 2000, I think it was, but I came to work with the late Dr. Jerry Mohat, who founded Canner through these grants. And I just wanted to emphasize our mission within Canner of all of our investigators, and I'm really proud to have Canner investigators here. Well, Dr. Diane O'Brien is our institute director, and Canner's within our Institute of Arctic Biology, but is a Canner investigator along with Dr. Morton, who's here. But I'm proud that all of the research project and faculty base our research on understanding what are the fundamentals of health, and particularly what are those strengths and what contributes to positive health outcomes, well-being and good physical health and mental health. And again, it was really Jerry's vision and legacy that I continue with, and that we also base our work on the knowledge of the peoples whom our research serves. We honor the knowledge of our Indigenous Alaska Native peoples as equal to the knowledge of our scientific experts. That's very important in the work that we do. And so I'm acknowledging our elders, our ancestors. I appreciate the land acknowledgement as well. So tonight, I'm going to focus now on my own program of research within Canner that I've been working on ever since I was a PhD student. So for 22 years, I've been working with this program where we're addressing, together with Alaska Native communities, actually at the request of Alaska Native communities, Canner, myself, and my wonderful team are working to eliminate, combat what really is unacceptable disparities that have been chronic and ongoing for far too long. But again, after this time, we're really making some good headway. Going to share it with you and also think through ways we can build upon it. And outreach to other communities who are impacted. All of us are impacted. Suicide is not an Alaska Native problem. It's not an Indigenous problem. It's not a military problem. It's our human problem and condition. And we are all connected with that. So I do want to start with that. I'm going to overview 3 projects, maybe 2 if I can't get to Be Well, which is our brand new project. But I'm going to focus on go over the history of this work. I'm going to talk about this. I'm not going to really show you our data because I wasn't really prepared to do that. I want to talk more about topically and what we've been doing process-wise, and I want to show you a lot of images from the work that's actually happening, what suicide prevention looks like, what healthy young people in communities look like. I want to focus on that. But we're going to look at some data too. So I'll start. I wasn't sure, again, how much context I should provide, but Alaska, it's our home. So who in the room has been to a village? Has everybody been to? That's wonderful. So I think that's going to be really special. So, so you all know, we all know Alaska's really big, right? I know, because I always just like teeny tiny Texas. Alaska is extremely diverse, and I wanted to point out our work was founded and still is ongoing in the Central Yupik region. So I will be focusing on the Central Yupik region, but I want to acknowledge the vast diversity of languages, of cultures, of peoples throughout our state. And then, of course, I want to end with the statement that Alaska is very culturally strong and really unique in that way in comparison to other areas of our nation. So I'm going to begin, because this is where our story of how our research kind of became involved with what was happening in our communities. So there was a series in the Anchorage Daily News. In fact, it's right here. So I still have a paper. I've got a few. I know, remember these? It's like, so, but there was a series, Pulitzer Prize-winning series, came out in 1988. And this series detailed, in very graphic detail, it was a series, it was over many weeks, the travesty, the devastation, and I thought I had animations on these, and these are supposed to pop up one at a time. These were the article titles of every single one of these in this series. A generation of despair, a Lackawanna suicide epidemic, a river of booze, a curse upon the unborn. The last article in this series was a revelation of hope. I added that question mark because I would really wonder that. And so when this series came out, this isn't just, that was the 80s. No, we're still seeing this kind of representation of our Alaska Native peoples. And so I was acutely aware during, again, a really important inquiry into our law enforcement needs. It's very important, but there's a series came out that essentially, characterized communities as lawless, as hotbeds of sexual abuse, and as everyone in communities as criminals. And it to me, it was, again, a very unfortunate way to look at a very important and urgent issue. It's the most fatalistic way, in some ways, to look at it. And it's stigmatizing, right? And especially for young people growing up in these communities. One of actually it said, a vanishing race, and then it was a Lackawanna suicide epidemic was attached to it. And, again, young people are growing up thinking, this is who we are. And that's not the story that we need to be telling. But first, so at this time, these portrayals were in response to like very rapid changes were happening in our state, particularly impacting our rural communities. And so this is literally images from Hooper Bay. So Franz Boas did an expedition out in Hooper Bay and coastal, and we've got lots of historical photographs. So this is from the Gonzaga archives. We took a group of our collaborators from Hooper Bay and did this like raid of Gonzaga. It was beautiful, also, a little, it was a powerful experience. But, so this is Hooper Bay in 1928, and you'll see it, and that's 1968. That might not be showing because Zoom has covered that up. That's 1968. And then that's in 2016. Hooper Bay is the largest community, largest village in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta in the central Yupik region. It's got about 12,000 members, or 1,200 people living there now. But it was, rapid growth was happening. And as you can see, the spreading out and the infrastructure, but that's a drastic change to a way of life where you're moving on the land and, and subsisting and, and again, now having this concentration. And with this, we see just a J curve in the suicide rates. Every year, or every 10 years, the suicide rates were doubling from 1965 to 75 to 85. It's a 500% increase. And really, though, it's not that the people are just in peril. It's because our Alaska Native people were imperiled by the changes, by the rapid changes, by the impositions of new governments, of new structures, of the missionary system. Required changes of the way families lived together and worked together. And so, again, these are impacts of colonization where people were imperiled. And we see now, these are our current statistics that suicide, though, in Alaska, it's a crisis for all people. So the suicide rates in Alaska are twice what the national rates are. National rates are 13 per 100,000. Here in Alaska, we're about 20 per 100,000. For Alaska Native people, it's 4 times higher than that. And for Alaska Native young people, it's the highest, unfortunately, and can be 8 to 12 times higher. Alaska Native young men are experience 4 times higher suicide deaths, and it's rural impacted in communities, and often alcohol is related. So this is the health status, Alaska Native Health Status Report, came out just a couple of years ago, and unfortunately, so as you can see, this is the central Yupik region that we work in, that we're doing our suicide prevention studies within, and it's one of now our 2 most highly impacted regions. So we understand, or need to understand, that the rise in the suicide risk is impacted, by the intergenerational trauma that comes from Alaskan people being imperiled by the impacts of colonization and change. And it really changed ways of life, ways of upbringing children. Well, children were literally separated from families and sent to boarding schools by plane load, and just weren't at home for years. And we know the impacts of adversity in childhood, and they have direct, and there has been many established studies that link adverse childhood consequences to poorer health outcomes. But rays of hope, but always hope. All throughout this, there were lives being lived. There were families loving, working together, just living the ways of life. There was persistence, there was resistance, and there was protection. And yes, there was love. And the culture continued. And there is a story of a people's survival and a people's resistance. And I hope you will see that in the suicide prevention efforts, because really that's what comes out and through it is all of those factors that led to the persistence of people through all of these really rapid imposed changes, there was incredible resilience and strength. And in response to the People in Peril series, the Alaska Federation of Natives, AFN, in the 90s, a few years after, 94, 95, put out an AFN call to action that our stories need to be told of of us living well. Our children need to hear it. Well, we all need to hear it. The public needs to hear it and see it because it's there. It's in us, and it's always been in us. These are inherent strengths from the millennia that Alaskan people inherit, the strengths and resilience of ancestors. And in all of our work, we would hear our elders say, suicide was unheard of in young people in particular. Really what we need to do is understand, what gave those strengths to us. And in the current memory of today's elders who cannot recall ever, even conceiving of it, when you're working so hard to live. And that's where a lot of this is going to go now, in that, really thinking back to, what gave us meaning and purpose, and we had that within our families and within our communities. We knew that, and it took all of us together for us to survive. And maybe the terms of survival have changed, and we need to understand what is putting our young people at risk, but also recognize that our ways, our teachings, our values still have power, even with these new threats that young people are experiencing, to contribute to survival. And that's what so in the People Awakening site, so that actually was the call to action that Jerry took up and wrote the first, I'm not sure if it was our first big research grant from the NIH and R01, but it was among the first. It was and so we got a big research grant to understand and just to essentially go gather stories from Alaska Native people from all over the state, to understand, in this study in particular, pathways to sobriety. So talking to Alaska Native people who had never had a problem with alcohol, or who had at one time, but who had been in a secure state of wellness and recovery from alcohol. And also to put forth that and this is a statistic or a fact that doesn't get stated as much as it should, I think, that Alaska Native people and American Indian people too have kind of the highest rates of lifetime abstinence and also sobriety in older adulthood than, let's say, our white Caucasian population. So what's contributing to that and to sobriety, rather than looking at the problem, the river of booze, as one article did in the People in Peril. And so with People Awakening, we did life history interviews with over 100 Alaska Native people, and then we went out and we did a focus study in the central Yupik region and did surveys with 700 plus people to understand what is protecting people, what's contributing to the lifetime sobriety or abstinence and recovery. And we came up with a set of protective factors. And again, this was a different way to do this work. Looking at protection and protective factors is not standard. And it was very cutting edge at the time to be doing that. But it was also in response to what the communities were telling us we needed to do and understand is, we need to understand what helps young people, because no matter what, no matter how hard we try to have our children avoid getting hurt, we're not going to be able to stop it. And that hurts are going to happen. We need to give our young people, our children, we need to give them skills and strategies, confidence, purpose, understanding, to be able to get through those hardships, hurts, and challenges. And one of the elders said, we don't just want our young people not die. I mean, that's like we want them to want to live and to have reasons for life. And so People Awakening, Kelly, it's your face that's doing it to me. No, it's in a good way, I mean, this is positive emotion I do still, because if you remain unaffected in this work, you're not doing it right. So still feeling it after all these years, but People Awakening allowed us to really flip the narrative, just flip it over, and so kind of systematically look at what were the characteristics in communities that healthy and strong people, when they were growing up, what do those communities look like? What do those families look like? What within individuals really contributed to that? And then again, instead of looking at, because we can't, actually in a research context, you can't measure like suicide death as an outcome. You can't. While it's wrongfully common, it's not enough to ever have us be able to show that where we're making an impact, but we can show if we're making impact on building those reasons for life, which do directly link to reduction in suicide risk in other established studies. So, and I do want to keep track of, there's a clock. Okay. So, well, and I guess this was our fun with numbers and circles and arrows, and this is some data that I'll show you. So this is outcomes from People Awakening, and then 4 other studies that followed People Awakening, where after we identified the protective factors, we developed measures. So that's essentially the surveys where we could go and ask people if these factors that are protective, if these strengths are in their lives. We can look at pre-existing protection, and then we can look at areas where we could build protection. So we went and did that. But then we also, we asked questions about people who had reasons for life, and then made some reasons for sobriety, or like how you think about alcohol and alcohol use and your own alcohol use. And what we did find was that, and this makes total sense when you think about it, is that risk factors for suicide and alcohol are both buffered by having protection and protective factors. So, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, but yeah, I mean, essentially they are a co-occurring process, or these risks, and sometimes I think we tend to separate out the different problems, and we address the substance use, and we do suicide over here with mental health, and wholly different offices at different times, and it's just, and again, our data and the communities are telling us too, it all goes together, because it's all self-harming behaviors. So this work led us directly into working with communities to support communities to implement their own cultural, community-driven approach to suicide prevention. And this work happened because at one point in my career, I thought research wasn't going to help. I was like, do we need more research? Is that really going to help? And so I was getting my PhD here, but instead, we didn't have a PhD in clinical psychology at the time. I would have gone and done that, but instead, so I went and I got we had a community psychology degree that could allow me to go do mental health, be a clinician and license. And so I went through that and picked that up, and then I went out and I worked for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Health Corporation as a mental health clinician. Of course, this is it was actually my internship to get licensure hours, and I was made a clinical supervisor immediately, placed in a rural station. Well, I asked to be. I wanted to live in a village because I also missed that. I missed living in Native communities, and so I wanted to live. So I went and I moved out to Emonik. It's a sub-regional hub, and I served these communities that you're seeing. But I realized within my 2.5 years, I think, that I was in that position, that my tools in my toolkit were not the life-saving ones that needed to be in those communities. But I could, and that's where I changed my mind about research saving lives and felt like, okay, well, I can, through research, help communities, support communities to implement their tools for life. that are going to be more effective. And I can help get the evidence, because you can't bill for these services like you can for sitting in a clinic office with a young person who just doesn't want to be there and wants to be out fishing or hunting, and but I can't take them out fishing and hunting, even though that's the only time they talk to me. But we can support communities. We can get that evidence. That data is there to show these outcomes. We just need to go that, so that's where I came back to it. But I got Jerry involved, and we wrote the first grants that led to this Knazevic work. So I think I'll do that next. So the Knazevic, the suicide prevention approach, communities instructed, communities deliver it. And what communities told us needed to happen, what young people needed. Again, they needed to learn those survival skills. They needed to learn, who they are as Yupik people, but more, they really needed to learn their value and how valuable they are as Yupik people and what their role is in the culture. And to do that, though, there was a lot of discussion with the elders. Actually, there was 2 years and 80+ meetings before we did a single activity with young people. It was just discussion and the community of Alakanak, which was a featured community. That was a community and a people in peril that was a Alakanak suicide epidemic. And we were in Alakanak. And while I was a clinician, that community suffered 11 suicides of young people. This is a community at the time of 550 people. So, and it was just devastating, and that was over that 2.5-year period. But again, there was a real galvanization of, but all right, we're doing this, and these are our young people. We need to come around them. And so let's really all come together, the elders are saying this, and figure out, when we were growing up, this wasn't happening, what gave us these strengths? And there was a lot of discussion about, well, we had a structure. We had this collective structure in our community. It's called a qazik, and I'm going to play a 3-minute video that will show you what a qazik is. But they said, it was more than a structure. It was this system. It was our church. It was our school. It was our everything, and that's where we all learned. And we all learned how to make our boots, mend our boots, make spears. But we also just learned how, where we learned about ourselves in the qazik. And but that all changed. And so what we need to do, this is elders, so what our approach is before we're running out and trying to teach young people how to hunt and get out and do things, we have to heal ourselves. Our community has to heal first. Our community has to come to one mind, and so that we can give these strengths to the young people again. So I'm going to play the video. Do I just click?
In traditional Yupik culture, the qazgiq was the men's house or communal place. As a central place where everyone gathered together, the qazgiq was an important place. It was a place to live during long winter months. It was a place to work on tools for survival. It was a place where important decisions were made and where people could go to get answers for life's great questions. The qazgiq was a sacred place for ceremony and a place for purification. It was a place for teaching and learning. It was a place for healing and treating wounds, those old and new. The qazgiq brought people and families together, creating community. When people began coming in from places far away, the Yupik world changed. The qazgiq structure stopped being built and they collapsed into the earth. New practices brought new problems for the people. Without a qazgiq to center the community, questions began to go unanswered and some wounds went untreated. This qazgiq model demonstrates how some Yupik communities are recentering their communities by connecting youth to their healing pasts and hopeful futures using a thousands of years old process to bring about change today.
That was Simeon John singing that song. That was Eliza doing the narration. So, and this is what we put in our grants. This is our logic model that describes overall the Knuzovic approach to really a community organizing process that takes place, and then the engagement of young people in a series of continuous and what is that, like when it keeps going? I guess continuous is, but in a series of activities that build those protective factors. So I didn't play the whole Kazakh model. We actually have a longer one on the website. So our Knuzovic manual that has the Kazakh model, the full video, and a bunch of resources. This is the next slide, I'm pretty sure. Is online for you all to look at too. But essentially, this is our step-by-step process for what communities do and how we measure outcomes and what we measure too as outcomes. But the Kazakh process, again, before any activities take place in the community, there are many gatherings of coming together, and with the understanding that part of what has led to the what we're seeing with individual youth and suicide is because the community is broken in some ways and fragmented, and the community has to come together. And this was a very important and also a very kind of innovative, and it's still, although it's growing, new way to look at suicide, the problem of suicide. It's usually looked at as an individual problem. And something that's mental health related, or something that we have to go into individuals and fix something within individuals. And actually Alakanuk and the elders there, they diagnosed that suicide was a disturbance and a disorder of the community. And it was something the community needed to come together and fix. That suicide was like a spirit, essentially, that had been able to come into the community because the community had lost some of its strengths and made young people vulnerable. So the first thing that we need to do is have the community address issues related to leadership and the teaching and instruction and all of that. And that, that you're identifying what in multiple levels is not just within individuals, but it's within all of us together as a group, and then doing the activities, and then we measure the outcomes that way. So this is the online, and maybe, I don't know, you can also, if you just Google Knuzovic, it comes right up. So, because there's not many things on the web that have Yupik names. So, and that describes a set of all the activities that are worth thought to be, really important. And a lot of our activities, of course, they were all kind of around a subsistence, seasonal schedule. They were all about connecting young people on the land and to the animals. It was very important. The foundation of a suicide prevention approach, includes, being able to deal with your strong feelings, because elders also said, we used to have to survive the weather and our hunger, but today young people have to survive their feelings. And that's related a lot to, remember the picture of Hooper Bay and that pressure cooker of 1,000 people living next to each other, and you can't really move, but it's both too many people but also too limited. And so things like young people and romantic relationships and breakups can be absolutely catastrophic. And elders will realize that our young people have to, again, survive these emotions. So we have to give them what helped us. And getting out in the land, talking to a dog, talking to a tree, super important, but it's strategies like this that, were at the foundation of the solutions to end suicide in communities. I just wanted to show you. So we've worked intensively. Well, we've worked with Alakanuk intensively for 17 years. We've actually been following young people from Alakanuk for 15 years. We have 15 years of data with about 100 young people, but now we have over, I think that there's over 1,000 young people now that we're following from 7 communities intensively. So Scammon Bay and all the communities by tribal resolution want to be named. They want us to acknowledge or recognize this is their work and showcase their work. So Scammon Bay was one of our most recent communities. These photos all were taken over the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. And this was really important. This is the one community that said, actually, we have to keep getting our young people out. And there was no school happening in the communities and the villages, and it was, it was a really, as we know, a very intensive time. But this community really took advantage of it and took young people out. And, again, these are the names of a lot of the modules. Getting your first catch is such an important rite of passage. And that was another aspect of life that had maybe kind of gone to sleep, we'll put it that way a little bit with all the changes, but really giving young men and young women their rites of passage. There are really important things you need to do when you get your first catch, or when you pick your first berries, when you make your first gasbak. Bringing that back for young people. And now that, subsistence and hunting it relies on aluminum weld boats and gas and gasoline. And gas in Hooper Bay, when I was just out there 3 weeks ago, it was $11 a gallon. And you often have to go, you have to go 20 miles, often at least. And so it takes a lot of resources, and many families don't have access. So they can't, young people aren't getting their first catches. They're getting them much later or not at all. And so what Kanazavik does is it allows opportunity because, we provide the gas. We provide the resources to subsidize the subsistence activities that are suicide prevention. That was just getting their first whales, gathering. And giving back and providing for elders, young people, it's a very huge cultural value. And young people is like their favorite part is just seeing the smiles on the faces of elders. Taking care of widows in communities is really, really important. And so, we, would really emphasize that and do activities that specifically serve elders and provide for the community and distribute goods in the community, Yupik foods. And the connection between, what you eat and your mental health. I don't think that's strongly made enough, but it needs to be, because food transitions, I think, are one of the most devastating that I've seen. I think that Dr. O'Brien here can agree with me in terms of what Canner has also, over the last couple of decades, been looking at with the traditional food transitions, and now, coming in of processed foods, refined sugars. And so there's a lot, and children and young people in particular are eating so much less traditional food, healthy food, and there's a lot of pop, chips, and candy in the diet, and from really young ages, and that just, it impacts your brain and impulsive. So what you eat this is a cornerstone of our Owen Mouse foods. I just love this because I just remember our first time when I was kind of newer to the communities, and they said they were going to go hunt mouse foods, and it was like, what the, these are the little caches that are put together by, they're not even mice, are they like the muskrats? What are they that do the, I don't know why I'm looking at there's something they're like our voles, but they're a particular kind. But they use this in soups and in agudak and everything. But I was really concerned because I was like, gosh, they worked so hard to put that away. But what was great, but I was told to calm down almost immediately, because they're like, we don't take it all. And, and there's a war, and they'll go over, it'll be fine. And, if there's one so that's good stuff. But I mean, again, and in that process, it was so fun, and we just could learn together. And the young people teaching me was also really an important part. It was actually an important part that we noticed was our research team we became the ones that I felt, we were the learners, and it was neat to have, these outsiders coming in, these fancy, and the young people knew so much more than us. And so these are, again, just all the different activities. And I just want to emphasize, the smiles and the laughter and the joy, and that's the normative, that's the picture, that is what's happening in our communities. And then through that process, again, that making the healthy connection to your past is really, really important. And so one of the instructors with Georgiana, who was in that, so one of the instructors for our Knuzovic, he was actually, was he right behind? Oh no, he was here. So this is Abe, and he was one of the instructors. He remembered when they were pulling up a beluga, he remembered in the school, in the Scammon Bay school, where's my school person? That there was this photo, and he's like, it just reminded me of that photo. And they went and they put these two photos together. But that little boy behind the little boy eating that sucker, that little other boy, that's Abe, and 30 years ago. Yeah, and it's like, and he said it just made him feel so good, that's what's helped him. He's a real strong pillar, and he's giving it back. So this is just, again, this is actually a slide or an information piece that we give to communities. I'm going to wrap up here in about 3-4 minutes so that we can talk a little bit. But so we share back with communities. So how we measure our outcomes and how we gather that evidence that this cultural practice works, is effective. It's more effective than cognitive behavioral therapy is in this context. And we've been able to show that. Because what we do is we collect, you measure sessions in CBT and other mental health delivery. We do measure sessions too. We measure them as attendance at those activities. So we deliver, and we do the data collection over a 2-year period, or 2 years of delivering activities. That's a long time, and that's a lot of activity data. But and so what we've been able to find is a dose response effect. This would be like if you're doing a medication trial. And so the more doses you get, more activities you go to, the more changes that we see, the more protective factors, the more reasons for life, the more reflective processes, and at different levels. We've had young people attend 100+ activities, so we do see it kind of tap out, like a saturation effect does happen, but certainly we do see stronger with dose. And so we are now, and the CDC will officially recognize that Knuzovic, the Tools for Life, suicide prevention is going to be our nation's first Alaska Native evidence-based practice, which is pretty cool. I'm just going to only make awareness of this. So we do have a new project that's now serving the interior. So over the course of the pandemic, of course, we all experienced that community-based work was really hard. I couldn't get on a plane and go out and do surveys, and it was really difficult. And so, but during this time, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute initiative, anyway, a grant funding agency, put out a call for proposals to do brief interventions for suicide prevention with young people. And a colleague of mine at RAND Corporation contacted me and asked if, we should do this. But, in thinking about how we would do Knuzovic, which, remember I said we just collect data over 2 years. It usually goes on for 5 years, if not more. How are we going to distill down Knuzovic into a brief intervention? Well, you know what? We were going to try. We felt like we could do this. And then also, how are we going to come up against the challenges of trying to do something virtually? Because at this point, we would propose a virtual intervention. And we won't get into the complications around or the aspects of equity, health equity, when you're in rural communities that have, very limited bandwidth, low access to, cell phones break, but you can't just go to GCI. So you have to wait 5 months to get a new cell phone and things. It's just, it's tough. But again, we felt, but we need to reach young people, and that is where they're at often, is online, and it's changing and improving, and so we wanted to give it a try. And at the basis, again, of our Knuzovic work, we titled this project because we love you. So we call it Be Well for short. But this is Alakanak. These are elders from Alakanak. Actually, this is Paula Ayunarak. And she is our, just everything, our grandmother of Kanazavik. But elders will always say, and before they begin the teachings, that we talk to you because we love you. We tell you these things because we love you, and just the affirmation of love we have seen is just so important. And yeah, well, I won't go there. So just to finish up, so we took some key components of Kanazavik, particularly the teachings around survival skills. We did kind of a mini Qaziak. Instead of a big community, it's just a virtual, smaller group. We have cultural leaders that get on the Zoom and talk to young people, but then give them ideas about practices they can do. And then what's really cool is we have a real gap here in Alaska in our clinical services about following young people once they've been referred in and come into services. We just don't have capacity in our state to give them a call again or follow them up. And so we're following young people. We're over 4 different follow-up sessions. So we're doing a post-vention approach with young people. And so we do have a website. We are taking, this is my pitch. If you do know, if you have families that you're in contact with, if you know of anyone or interact with anyone in your lives, Be Well is open in the interior region. We have all of our permissions and approvals, and we take referrals. So please do refer to young people. So I encourage you to check out the website. Thank you so much. And do I stand? Okay.
Time for questions. So if you have any questions for God, can you use the microphone? Since this is live stream, it's also going to be recorded on YouTube, so you can have the archives. So anybody has a question?
I got a question. So congratulations on such awesome work. And so this access to the congratulations on such awesome work. And with the context, the question of access to this treatment strategy, so Be Well is exciting. Do you see where else it's going, and how in the mental health field are new practices adopted? What, like, are they, how do you get something to be adopted, or what is that a whole nother?
That's an implementation science grant that is coming up. It's a question that we have been talking about for years and years and addressing, because when we started off working in 2 communities, Alakanak and Tuksuk Bay, then we got another grant to add 3 other communities because we're doing a trial. But when we did that, then there was concern, rightly raised by the 2 communities that we're developing this, we're doing it. How are we going to sustain it? And where are you going to leave and go? And if you go to other communities, does that mean we're done? And that answer was no. We've done long-term, now longitudinal. Like I said, okay, we have to make this a longitudinal study. But yes, essentially, we're doing all of this so that it becomes a scalable service, right? That we're able to embed it into our usual care. This should be, but that question of how is a big one, and one that certainly needs to involve, when we're looking at our state, like the Mental Health Trust Authority, we've had lots of discussions with that agency, but when we're looking at our state Medicaid billing regulations, and how are we going to embed this in a behavioral health system? Should it be embedded in a behavioral health system? Is that where it lives? We've also talked about, this could be school-based. And might work better in being school-based. And so maybe school districts, or we could look at how schools could encourage us, especially when we're thinking rural communities. And schools, we often are doing our activities there because they have the gym, and it's one of the largest rooms to gather in. So we're in the school, and that's where we sleep all the time. Kelly, that's a great question. I don't have the answer to that, because we also have communities that have heard, there are 56 communities in the YK Delta region. We've worked in 7 now, and we're only really active right now in 4, I would say, and we're getting funding for others. But we have other communities who say, well, why aren't you working with us? How can we be a part of that grant? And so Yeah, and then there's the regional question. Be Well, we did an adaptation, and so we work a little differently with our at the Baskin Gwitchin youth than Yupik youth, but at the same time, we're finding there's a lot of ability for us, like protective factors are protective, and love is love. And so, but we're actively in that. If you've got ideas.
Okay. I like the school idea.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Demmer. I'm an attorney, and I am a professor in tribal governance, and so I do a lot of work in the justice system. And so I see the intersection between youth and suicide and victims of crime, tribal justice issues. And one thing that in my previous life I did a lot of law and advocacy at the federal level for change, but we've been trying to get the Office of Victims of Crime to open up funding for suicide treatment and assistance, because we think there's a direct, we don't have a study to prove this, but there's a direct correlation to the historical trauma that they experience in families in boarding school and whatnot. And so I'm just wondering if in your study, if you had questions about being victims of crime and if you have any data on that, because I just think that there's a lot of money in victims of crime. It's reduced a little bit because of some of the administration, the prior administration, but there's still a lot of money there for tribal communities that is being a little bit untapped. So I just wanted to make you aware of that and just ask about that, sort of what you think about that.
It is a great connection, and I feel like we've been on emails. I know your name. I'm really glad you're here. Thank you, Michelle, for being here. So that connection between our justice systems and our mental health systems, it's another kind of broken link, I feel like, or maybe it's not even a link that has ever been made to be broken, but it's super important. We do not ask questions directly about like violence exposure or experience with our young people. Right now, we just do our surveys and collect our data from young people, although our new study will be working with adults now too. But we have very strongly, like lots of evidence, observationally in communities of how important it would be if we could, particularly for us to be able to get our adults, because we always need adults, family members to come help with the activities, right? These projects, we can usually afford to pay 2 people to be coordinators, but we need a lot more than that to take 50 young people out. And so in one community, in Emonic, there's a magistrate that's based, and so, and we had so many discussions where we're like, okay, but if we could build in where community service hours and, that we could get instructors, because these are all, again, wonderful people, and this would be, and so many strengths are there. So we've talked to magistrates about at that level of involvement in terms of just being able to have this delivered in the community. But the other thing that we've noticed is just the added risk for young people who have gotten in like a minor consuming, right? Who are justice involved, particularly young people who go to the Bethel Youth, like the juvenile detention, and come back from juvenile detention. They're really at high risk. So like if we knew, we could do some special like recruitment and efforts to get those young people, but that's about where it is. But I think there's a wonderful project just sitting right there. So I would love to talk with you more. I think we could do something. Okay, and I know that.
Stacy, thank you for the work that you're doing. When you showed that beautiful video, one question that popped in my mind was, I wondered about the importance of the physical space for communities to come together. I noticed as we look down airily on the very early setup with the central roundhouse, and then in the modern versions, the walls were lined with beautiful, colorful drums. There was clearly this. It seemed to me like, is there scope for investment in, or is there kind of the community kind of coming together to dedicate that space? Like, how important is the space? It seemed in those early situations, the space was a community built kind of thing as well. So, I just wanted
Yeah, so there's another wonderful, so many study ideas, there's so much work to do, but the impacts of built environment on your mental health are also huge. And just the ways that the built environment in rural communities has changed from, again, the sod housing, literally living within the land. Like you lived within the land, and you lived within the land. Now you live on top, and usually now in coastal communities, you live on stilts on top. So you live up in the sky almost. And it's really, and there's mobility issues for elders who literally can't leave houses that are on stilts because there's no other way. And so, but I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot lately with climate change and the environment, but our especially Hooper Bay, the community of Hooper Bay, because in that video, I don't know if it was clear, but when it showed that photo of the collapsed, that literally was Hooper Bay's last qazik. And so you can actually still go in, and there's some artifacts and things, and we had taken young people out to, that's called Old Hooper Bay, just so they could look at that, they could see their ancestral lands. But you know, Hooper Bay in particular has very much wanted to build a qazik, like to actually have one. They have, actually Hooper doesn't really have a community center that's not nearly big enough for their, but they want a traditional qazik. But at the same time, they want one that's, you know, maybe they don't have to rebuild it every year. So, but you know, it'd be working with architects and trying to figure out like what would that look like. And so that's the other thing that I've really wanted to do is support communities to find, maybe it's, I don't know, capital funding from our state could support that more, the structural work to kind of return communities a bit more back to, you know, what their environment felt like. You live in it. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Totally.
I do see it. And I don't want to keep everyone here too long. I promise I can look at.
First of all, fantastic talk. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. And I do think, regardless of the level of the audience, I think you were a little worried about that at first. You absolutely nailed it. It was a beautiful presentation. And I have so many things going on in my head right now. But one of the things that we're working on here at UAF is using local materials to 3D print homes. And this might be a really good way to do that. Because you don't have to bring in the building materials and the architecture is done prior. I'm just like, I don't know, I just really think there's there. You can print using local materials, something that would be sustainable for the community. I think we should talk about it.
Oh, I would love to do that. We had interacted with the cold weather climate.
Yeah, so Bruno is part of the.
Is that part of it?
Yeah, you're right. Cold climate housing.
Cold climate, yeah.
Yeah. Also, it's right now it's NREL, but the same concept. Bruno, who's the lead of that, is working with Nima, who's here in this building, actually, doing some of the tests on using various materials, so that we don't have to ship in the materials to do some of the building. You just use what's around you, and it's in a way it's modern technology that takes us back to the way it used to be.
Thank you. I do have that because now I found you. I couldn't- So do you see the school connection?
I do. I just still sort of wondering, when you talked about creating links, how have you seen schools be successful in integrating in this, or what do you think? How can we strengthen that link? Because we know that the schools oftentimes, they're outside the community, and it is hard to. We've all sat in those classes in school that aren't relevant and aren't building the protective factors. So, do you have any insights for how to transform the role in the school?
I definitely have some insights, and I can tell you what, because it's community by community, and often what it comes down to is it often comes down to key individuals in your community, but isn't it that like that in your departments and your work? But and so if you have a really good, like if you have an instructional leader that is there and they're gonna be there. So instructional leaders that have either maybe married into the community. We haven't worked with any school where instructional leaders have come from the community yet. That's gonna happen, but who've married in, who've been there a long time, who have who have the open-mindedness that this school is the community's. It's not the district's. It's not theirs. It's the community's. And that opened the school to us. That's really been, that's what's worked best. And that means opening classrooms for us to come in, and young people take their surveys as part of their school day and things, and that's wonderful. But it really is this the client, like the culture of the school and who's in there, and that's just so key. So I don't know how to be transformative. I would look at a school you tell me like what within our educational system and training and practice can be producing, leaders of the local schools with these characteristics. But there's also, I think there needs to be some transformation in just the way that curriculum is delivered in the rural schools. It just can't follow standards. You can't follow the standards, and it just infuriates me to see it. But you could do the most. And we have done this. Like we've done Knuzovic activities in the science classrooms. When there's a science teacher, it's hard to keep a science teacher in your community. So when there is a science teacher, we'll go out and do a moose hunting activity, and then the young people will be teaching anatomy to the teacher often. But there will be like lots of biology you can do when you're butchering a moose, and all of that. And that's when we've seen it work best. But there would need to be some change.
I'm just thinking of there's a pilot in 5 sites right now for tribal compacting. So maybe,
I did hear that.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to have to happen.
Would that
Yeah.
spark the
Yeah.
community ownership of the school?
Okay, well, I think I'm getting the hanger. So we can keep talking afterwards. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.